EA Sports. It's in the game.
Hello! It's the return of the Retro series. It's taken me a year to find enough time to put this one together. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Sorry about that, but it's back and I've got plans to keep it going, I promise. So the last video covered 2002 FIFA World Cup, leaving us at FIFA 2003 in the timeline. You probably noticed that from the title. On we go then. FIFA 2003 released on the 15th of November 2002. It's the 10th game in the main series and one that performed well for EA commercially, apparently outselling PES 2-1 with a market-leading 2.5 million units sold across all platforms in the first couple of months following release. Doesn't sound like a lot compared to the 1.3 million FIFA 13 sold in its first 48 hours, but times change, don't they? We saw an uplift graphically as EA left behind DirectX 7, used for FIFA 2001 and 2002, possibly tied to their new broadcast style packages, and we also got improved player likenesses for certain players, including the cover stars, something EA would look to highlight as much as possible by getting up close and personal with players in certain situations. This was also the first game to feature the EA Tracks setup we've been using from this point onwards, bringing us gems from artists like Kashin and Miss Dynamite and Idlewild and Avril Lavigne. Okay, maybe not gems, but it's significant seeing that that system's still in use 14 years later. We had a choice of 450 teams across 16 leagues, not a huge improvement over FIFA 2002, but check out the rest of the world section. It's absolutely stacked. The same sadly can't be said for the internationals though. For some reason, genuinely no idea why, EA decided to only feature teams that qualified for the 2002 World Cup, despite the World Cup having had a dedicated game and it clearly being a terrible idea that was absolutely unnecessary. And it meant that teams like the Netherlands were left out. Very, very odd decision. Anyway, with all the teams that featured, that gave us around 10,000 players, and whilst we're still not treated to a fully fledged career mode, in fact leagues last just 5 years, there was Club Championship mode, which allowed you to pit your team against 17 others from Europe's elite. We'll cover that one in more detail later. One thing that was upsetting was the removal of the Creation Center from FIFA 2002, certainly on consoles anyway, and in-game anyway. It was available on PC as a separate tool from the game, and now a little research will lead you to the conclusion that the community tools are generally going to be a better place for PC customization, but to see EA actually put a tool out was pretty cool. It also allows you behind the curtain a little bit, because you can easily see how many generic player faces there are, 80, how many hairstyles, 41, and there's only 4 beards, although they are all absolutely magnificent. And you can also easily see how adjusting a player's stats affect their transfer value. It's affected by position, so the highest you can get is maxing out a striker, giving you a value of just over 29 million. Those were the days, eh? 29 million for a 99 rated striker. You can make your own Andy Carroll joke. And to be fair, it was all a bit arbitrary because those values didn't really affect anything in game. No legendary difficulty yet, and the rest of the options are pretty much the same as we've seen before, although there is a slider to adjust power-up speed. Overall, revisiting it now, it feels like the emphasis really was on the aesthetics, from the club logos overlaid on the pitch, the player close-ups and the broadcast styling to replays. It brings to mind what EA have been doing since the move to Xbox One and PS4. Remember when they recently brought in the little highlight packages that play at half-time and at the end of the match? FIFA 2003 had those. It also had gorgeous orange skies, the crowds looked great for the time, and there was a wealth of other touches, all geared towards adding loads of life to the Club Championship mode, because that's the real meat of FIFA 2003, Club Championship mode. A league setup featuring 18 of the best clubs in the game. In reality, it's just a league, but EA did make a point of going to town on presentation for the selected clubs. They all have their stadiums recreated very well, like the smoke here in Galatasaray's ground, naturally not seen in the Highbury library. And there are also other touches like real chants recorded at real games. And I mentioned player likenesses briefly, but EA went even further. Check out Pierluigi Collina. There's analysis available on the other clubs if you like reading, including last season's finish, top scorers, managers, stadium capacity. It's all just little trivia tidbits, and you can even drill down into the players individually. So I guess it's fluff, but it's pretty cool. In a similar vein, there's also the Hall of Kits, which lets you peruse all of the kits in the game. Again, not exactly useful, but ironically, it's actually more appealing now, 13 years later, than it would have been in 2003. It now serves up a nice little repository of club kits from the time, and it's quite nice to have a little flick through. Back on the pitch though, things seem to suffer a little from EA's focus on the cinematic side of things, and the game actually feels quite basic. I know it's now 14 odd years old or whatever, but even so, FIFA 2003 plays a very simple game of football. Shooting's pretty wild and it feels quite tricky to get any real weight behind the ball. It's all very floaty. The same can be said for any ball not played along the ground really. There's very little interaction between players, unless you count this time that two PSG players glued themselves together on their way through my defence. I guess tactically it worked, so there's that. Loads of different camera options, although they aren't all useful. A few seem geared towards highlighting the work EA had done on the players, getting you in a bit close and not really giving you a good view of the pitch. And the dynamic camera made me feel a bit ill.
Not one to remember though.
The big talking point in terms of a gameplay addition was freestyle control, which like we see now was an idea or some tech that had made it into another EA Sports game first, for example the NBA games. The idea behind freestyle control was to allow you more creativity on the ball using the right analog stick, supposedly allowing you to do all these wonderful moves in the name of creativity, but in reality it's a bit oversold. You can use it for knock-ons and the occasional shimmy or feint, but most players in the game aren't actually good enough to do anything with it. I should say that those feints can be incredibly effective, but from reading the marketing fluff and the manual, you'd think that freestyle control was a fully featured trick stick, and it really is not that. There isn't really anything added in way of tricks. Best you can hope for is a little back heel here and there, but some of the animations are pretty slick. Apparently some of the action on that freestyle control stick is a bit unreliable because the moves are dependent on the defensive pressure and the position of the ball relative to the player, so most of the time you're going to have the ball in front of you at your feet, and therefore it doesn't do all that much. Another large change is free kicks. FIFA 2003 brought in what's probably my favourite free kick mechanic in any FIFA game ever, mainly because it's just so arcadey. You've got a crosshair on the goal that stays where you put it for a target, doesn't bungee around. The distance to goal mapped out on the floor, a simple, if quite fast power bar, and a ball in the corner to add some swerve. Taking free kicks in FIFA 2003 is bloomin' fun, let me tell ya. In terms of actual gameplay, it's a bit mixed. Keepers have a tendency to vacate their line quite badly at times, and some of the physics, particularly in regards to shooting, can be a bit erratic. Shooting overall is a bit odd at times. Massively powered shots can feel weak, and sometimes the softest tap of the shoot button somehow unleashes a rocket. The run indicator from previous games returns, although everything feels pretty manual, I guess is the best term to use, keeping more recent FIFAs in mind. There's very little locking onto the ball, which works well in some cases and not so well in others. It's nice to have the freedom to play passes into space, but it can go wrong pretty easily. At complete odds with that is just how rigid the game feels, because despite the freedom you have with passing, everything else feels quite restrictive and kind of on rails. I guess that's a sign of the times. Another telltale sign that we've gone back in time is substitutions loading. If you make a change, they have to be loaded into the game. And back in FIFA 2003, you just had to wait. It wasn't masked by a cutscene or anything, just watch the loading bar when your sub's getting ready. John Motson is once more on the mic in the commentary box, but for the second game in a row from the main franchise, his co-commentator was changed, with FIFA 2002's Andy Gray being replaced by Ali McCoist. This was at a time when there was a lot less dialogue built up and actually being used, so I guess switching out the co-commentator on a yearly basis wasn't that troublesome for EA. Plus, with it being older, there was less interchange between the two, so they could swap in McCoist without having to throw out much of Motson's previous audio.
Welcome to Turkey, welcome to the Ali Sami Yen Stadium. Here's Ali McCoist. Tell us about these teams, Ali.
Thanks very much. Here they are then, John. Galatasaray. Well, plenty of width about this side today. 5 across the back, which means the wing-backs will be responsible for getting the ball forward to the forwards. Next, Arsenal. Playing with a flat back 4 here today, the manager I know is keen to get the ball forward as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Ali. Now let's get started.
So that was FIFA 2003, a solid entry, although one that didn't bring all that much to the table for FIFA, besides EA Tracks of course. Apologies again for taking so long to get this one out, but I've bought a new toy and some new old games to give myself a kick up the backside. Maybe I should do like a game collection tour or something. I've got a lot of football games. Let me know. Anyway, the retro series is back and it's staying, but the next one probably won't be FIFA though. Bye.